Lights don't work, so you'll call an electrician. You'll follow an apprenticeship like most trades. I love doing multiple different things all the time. Go under the floor and you can come across a lot of spiders, snakes. You can't see electricity. I've been shocked a few times in my life. Move into their own business. You realise your tradies are someone that you rely on.
Hey there, just a quick shout out to all the listeners of Inside the Real Job. Firstly, a huge thank you for tuning in. If you haven't already, hit the follow button to help us reach more ears and bring in amazing guests to share their journeys. And if any of you or someone you know is eager to talk about their profession or promote their industry, shoot me an email. You can find my contact details in the episode description. All right, let's get on with it. Enjoy this episode. Brett, what's your definition of being an electrician?
There's probably a few definitions. Basically, it's someone who works with electricity. And the way I see it, because of what I do, is sort of electrical maintenance. So you might have a power point broken in your house or your lights don't work. So you'll call an electrician to come there and try and figure out the problem for you and fix the problem for you.
And when you say there's a lot of definitions, so I'm assuming there's different pathways to become an electrician, or is there only the one set path?
There's the one set path. You'll follow an apprenticeship like sort of most trades. But then once you become an electrician, depending on what you've done through your apprenticeship, you might follow a different path. Like you might work in domestic, which is mostly houses, or you might work in industrial, which might be factories, or you might work in maintenance where you're fixing things a lot for many different companies. It all depends on what apprenticeship you did as to which direction you might follow.
Great. When we say apprenticeship, is that a 4-year journey, and is that including a lot of study and practical?
Yeah, so I've only really had a couple of apprentices, but mostly they do 1 day a week at TAFE and the other 4 days are at work, and that's for 3 years. And then the last year they sort of work every day of those 5 days. And then they do a test at the end, which is called a capstone. And you need to pass that test, plus all your previous study that you did in the 3 years, to get your electrical license. You can spend that 4 years with different companies, but they all need to sign you off that you've done that period of time.
Okay, and what's each year like?
That will depend on your abilities. Initially, you'll probably have not much idea of what's going on unless you've had some experience with your family or something like that. But slowly you'll get to learn more and more about the trade. But initially, like any trade, you'll probably be doing just some menial tasks just to get you used to working on a job site, or because safety is a massive one. Mm-hmm. Depending on what your company does will probably dictate how you learn and how quickly you move forward.
Yeah, okay. And can you maybe paint us a picture? Like what would a first year apprentice be doing compared to a third year apprentice?
Okay. So let's just imagine they were working on houses. So first year would probably be given jobs that are reasonably easy to get right and stuff that you'll still continue to do for the rest of your trade. So like installing a power point, installing a light fitting or a fan. Obviously heaps of different things that go on, but running cables can be a bit more complicated and knowing where to run them and how to run them. So as you get further through your trade, you'll probably move forward with those bigger tasks. Just easier stuff at the beginning and then move forward slowly.
And as soon as you get your license, that means you're a full-fledged electrician. And if you wanted to, you could go out on your own or continue to work with whoever.
Yeah, so you'll find a lot of people when they do get their license, they probably continue to work with the same person. Then if they've gotten confident in what they're doing or they've watched the way the business might run, then they might decide to move into their own business. So I suppose there's a bridge there of knowing how to be an electrician and then wanting to run your own business, which is sort of what I fell into. And there's a big difference between those two things. But being told what to do and figuring out what to do and telling someone else to do it, big step. But something that a lot of electricians do, and you drive around, you'll see tons of electricians.
You do.
A lot of them owning their own business, and they might only have a small business, but it's a big change when you do that.
And how I go about getting into an apprenticeship.
So a lot of people have asked me that. A lot of customers that I've got, my son's or my daughter's finishing school and they want to do a trade. Electrical seems good. What I generally will tell people is electricians use wholesalers where they buy their equipment. So I always tell them to go to the wholesalers, of which there's many around, and tell them to put a piece of paper with all their details on the counter with some little tear-off strips with their phone number, and it just details about what they've done, and there's so many electricians going into these places every day. They see this bit of paper, they're actually looking for it, and they can tear off a strip of number and give you a call and say, are you interested in doing this or that? And there's that many wholesalers around. That's what I've told plenty of people to do. And if you have your driver's license, that's going to be key. There's a thing called a white card, which is like an industry standard course that you might do to learn how to work on work sites safely.
Okay.
So if you had that white card and your driver's license, you're already in front of someone who doesn't have any experience because you've got those two things. Because they might ask you on your first day, oh, have you got your white card? You say, no, well, can you do that, please? But if you already had it, you're more likely to step ahead.
And how do you get the white card? Is it an online thing?
Yeah, you can do it online. It's quite
Is it a year thing or?
No, it's just once you've got it for the rest of your life. And it's quite easy to just look up white card. I mean, that's for any trade, not just electrical. Plumbing, carpenter, whatever, they'll all want you to have a white card, which will help you when you work on a site. You might be asked to produce that white card to show that you've got that qualification. So if you've already got it, it's a step ahead.
That's a good tip. And I know back in the younger years, people would leave school to do a trade in year 10. I know most people finish high school these days at year 12, but are you aware of anything that you could start before you finish high school?
I have heard that there is pathways you can follow, even from year 9, I believe, where you can actually do a pre-apprenticeship at school. I think is fantastic. So if you've got that early start at school, you're going to look more employable to those guys that are looking for someone with just a little bit more experience than someone who's never done anything. And I would encourage anyone that was going to be an electrician to try and finish year 12. I think you become more mature. We haven't touched on this, but it can be very dangerous because you can't see electricity. So you can become complacent very easily and people get killed. So not to turn anyone off doing it, it's dangerous. So I think with a bit of maturity, finishing year 12, it would definitely help.
That's good. What does a typical day look like for a full licensed electrician?
Looks like an 8-hour day normally, 7 a.m. start, 3 p.m. or 3:30 finish. People used to have like about a half-hour lunch break, but I think people are moving away from that now, just having a shorter break at the start of the day and finishing a bit earlier. Again, another thing which will depend on who you work for, whether they do a lot of overtime. Working people's houses, I suppose that 7 to 3 is pretty normal, but you might work in breakdowns, so you might have to work after hours when the power can be turned off.
Right.
So you're not interfering with other people. So it will depend on what sort of angle you get as to where your hours go.
I could see that the break hours more if you're working on a commercial site.
Yes.
Corporate offices or whatever need to finish their day first before you can go in and do your thing.
That's right. You do get to learn how to work around people. But if you have to turn the power off, obviously it's going to impact a lot of people. You just probably have to do those jobs after hours. So if you're prepared to do a bit of after hours work, that's always on the cards when you're an electrician.
Again, even whether it's industrial or residential, it just depends who you work with. There's always extra work and longer hours. For example, if there's certain things that are due,
yes,
you probably need to do overtime. Because
So-
maybe the next trade, plumber or whatever, they need to wait till you do your part. So you could be holding people up.
That's right, yeah. So that's, the domestic or the commercial angle. If you're doing a big build, you've got your certain times when you'll come into the job. They call that the rough-in stage, the early stage, running all the cables and getting them ready before, as the walls are built, before they put all the gyprock or timber linings on the walls. So that'll be the sort of the first stage, and then that's when the plumbers will probably come in as well and run all their stuff. Then you leave the job for a bit and the builders keep going, and then you come back and they call that the fit-off stage. So that's when you're putting the actual power points in and the lights and switches, the switchboard. So if you're doing a big job like that, it might be staged over a fair bit of time. But if you do smaller jobs like come into someone's house and put a power point in, you might do 3 or 4 of those jobs a day. It really depends on what type of electrical work that you're engaged in.
And I guess with that stage 1, you would probably then have multiple jobs around because you need to come back to certain places
Correct.
at a certain time.
Yeah, so this is where it's good to have a reasonably good memory as an electrician.
Okay.
Which is probably something we can all work on. But you'll do several of those jobs, so you've got multiple jobs on the go, and you're roughing in cables and wiring up to a plan, and then you might go to another one and do that. Then you've come back to this other job 3 months later. You've got to try and remember what you've done and where you've got cables run and what you were doing there. So yes, it can be complicated in that regard, going back and forth on those bigger jobs.
Okay. And what about keeping up with your skills, is there any hours or certification the electrician needs to do throughout the year to keep their license?
Yeah, look, funnily enough, there isn't. So once you've got it, just keep going. It hasn't changed a lot, and there's probably a lot you can learn, but it depends again on the job that you're doing. So if you're staying in that same domestic trade, what you might find has changed is the products you can get, but the way you do it is still much the same. There's not really any rotation unless you want to move forward and become called a level 2 electrician. They're the guys that work on the power lines in the street, and they run the cable from a street to your building and put the meters in them. So that might be a different angle that you choose to follow. And if you did that, then obviously there's more study that goes along with that. Or you might move into the fire part of the industry, smoke detectors and emergency exit lighting. So it depends on your pathway as to how much training you might be. But I think you'll find most electricians who just do domestic work, once they've got their license, that's pretty much all they'll need to do, and maybe just keep up with industry trends. And mostly that's found by chatting with other electricians, or when you're at the wholesaler buying equipment, talking about that with people, seeing new products.
That makes sense. And what's a challenging day look like for an electrician? Is it all about going to different places all the time, or is it the job itself?
In one way, that's something that I love being about electrician, is you're doing multiple different things all the time. Well, that's what we do anyway. So you will go to different jobs all the time. And so a challenge, I think, and what you'll find is probably the better electricians are people that can fault find. So that's probably one of the hardest things. You might hear someone say, oh, my lights are tripping out, or power's tripping out, I've got no power. So to go to someone's house and try and diagnose that problem and fix it can be extremely challenging. Sometimes it can take 2 people to figure it out. It could take hours, could take days, depending on the complication of the build of the house, because you can't access everything. And depending on the way the cables run when the building was built will govern whether you can get to all these cables and fix this problem. So a challenging day and a good day is when you're doing fault finding and you can figure it out.
Is it a bad day if you can't figure it out?
Yeah, it's a bad day, and it's also a bad day for the customer. If you've spent 5 hours at their house with 2 people, it's costly, and you're obviously trying your best all the time to try and figure this problem out. But I actually quite like doing that sort of stuff. It's quite good to be able to have that skill, and then you figure out the next time you do a job, well, I'm not going to do that way, because now I realise I had that problem at that job, and I never want to make sure that someone else goes through that again. So
you learn as you go.
You do, you learn as
through
you
the
go.
experience.
Yeah, massive amount of experience, and that's, you learn how to do your rough-in job better, like no joins where you can't find them sort of thing, because if someone does a join where you can't find it, you can spend hours trying to find that, and the customer's just sitting there looking at their watch. But eventually, if you do find it, you're like, well, why did they even do that?
Yeah,
so,
okay.
Yeah, you definitely learn a lot doing fault finding.
Right. And you mentioned the customer, they're spending money, whether it's for an hour or 5 hours or 2 days, or depending on the job. Is that a challenge itself in dealing with people?
Yeah, look, I think you definitely have to learn how to deal with people and try and explain to them, because everyone wants to know, how much is this going to cost? How much is that going to cost? Which is fair enough. I want to know the same thing. Sometimes that's very hard to know how long a thing might take. I think people expect, I'm putting a fan in, that would be the same as putting a fan in any house. Not the case. Depends on the structure of the house. So yeah, learning how to deal with the customer is very, very important, and letting them know from the beginning a rough idea of how much it might cost, and then talking to them through the process to make sure they understand if something's gone wrong or something's gone well, that this is going really well, so we finished a bit quicker than I thought, or just so you know, this is quite challenging and probably going to take us a bit longer than I'd estimated. That's something I still find challenging to this day, trying to explain to people how long things might take, because it can be very difficult and different in each house.
Definitely.
It's not standard.
Everyone's different too.
Yeah, that's right.
Good one. And talking about finding the solution to a problem is something that you enjoy. Do you have any real success stories that pops out all the years of you being an electrician that you might always come back to and go, oh, I remember that customer, we had this challenge and that was good?
I think, talk about fault finding, I don't know if there's been any particular ones, but what you learn is if you keep trying, you'll eventually find it. So it's very easy to give up and go, oh, we're never going to find it. And some of the guys I work with, I try and instill that in them. Like, if you keep going, eventually you'll get it. Like, it can feel like it's a dead end, but you learn that by doing a lot more fault finding. You can just throw your hands up in the air and go, oh, we can't fix it. And I'm like, okay, so if we can't fix it, how do we have a solution for the customer? So, or you might think, okay, well, we can't fix it, but what's another way to get the cable to that point? Let's forget about finding the fault. Let's disconnect it and run the cable a different way, or find a solution a different way. For me, that's one of the more challenging things about the job, is making sure a customer's aware of where you're headed with fault finding.
Nice. And you mentioned before that level 2 certificate.
Yep.
Is there other levels, or is that the highest you can go?
Yeah, there's level 2 and there's level 1. Quite high-end stuff might work for... You've heard of Ausgrid?
Yes.
They're sort of the electrical provider throughout Sydney, where you might see those green boxes on the side of the road. They're called substations. That's sort of what level 1 work does. So that's a bit foreign to me, because it's something that I'll never ever get involved with. Quite specialised. And then the level 2, you work with level 2s a lot because they can do the connection to the house, but not something that I've spent a lot of time with. Most electricians have a level 2 that will contract to them and help when they're needed in that particular type of job.
And I think you said earlier, to move up to the levels, and just might need additional certification and, I guess, hours of experience.
And definitely different courses they do. So it's always good to know people that do that, because you can come to a complete dead end. What you might be doing, if you didn't know someone like that can finish the job for you.
And do you know if you have to have a certain amount of hours as a normal electrician before you can go to a level 2?
You would have to have your electrical license, and then you would choose to go into that avenue, and you probably would have to almost do not an apprenticeship, but you would work with another level 2, because it's quite specialised. You might see the guys up in those trucks, the bucket trucks, cherry picks. That's something that we would never do. But if you worked with someone, you'd get the experience in that regard.
Cool. And in terms of salary, just a range-wise, what would I expect if I was in a first-year apprentice versus when I get closer to fourth year?
I know there's an award range of pays, but it will be up to the person that runs the business as to whether they pay you the award. Let's just say, for instance, it's $18 an hour. Mm-hmm. The company can decide to pay you more than that if they feel like that's not enough. And then every year you'll go up and up till you get to your fourth year. So most sort of maybe tradesmen these days are looking at anywhere, probably somewhere between $40 to $50 an hour, but it would depend on how long you've been in the industry. You're not going to just come straight out of your fourth year and get $50 an hour. So probably around that sort of 35 to 40 after you've finished your apprenticeship. And it does depend on the company that you're working for pays.
Yeah. And I know it's personal choice, but through your experience in the industry, do you feel like more people make their own money if they go on their own?
Yeah, look, they do, definitely. I mean, if you're working for someone and you're getting paid $50 an hour, that's still great money. But I suppose, again, it depends on how you deal with that money. But yes, if you start running a business and you've got a few people working for you, therefore you're making money off them.
You have people working means you're able to do more jobs.
Yeah, you're able to do more jobs, and that's what I've sort of fallen into. And yes, it's great. You can definitely make some okay money doing that, as long as you've got customers to make sure that you keep getting the repetitive work. People that start out on their own, they struggle to get those 40 hours a week that you would need to keep your business running. So it depends how many overheads I suppose you've got, because electricians mostly have a van with a lot of equipment in it. So once you've bought all that, you're pretty set, but then you need to keep the money coming in to sort of pay the bills. And if you've got 3 to 4 people working for you, that's a lot of work that you need to keep up to them. You don't want them ringing you and saying, like, we've got no work today, but I'm still going to have to pay you for your 8 hours. You've got to have that good customer base where you just keep getting work.
Great. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that first session with Brett. What really stood out to me was how he described the journey of being an apprentice. I especially like the tip he gave about reaching out to wholesalers as a way to connect with electricians. Brett also highlighted how every day brings a different experience. It's a career that's both rewarding and challenging, perfect for those who are curious and solution focused. Each job is unique. No two houses or work sites are the same, so you constantly need to find the right solution, not only to get the job done, but to do it with quality and efficiency for your customers. If you found that insightful, stick around as I continue my chat with Brett, where he dives into his personal journey. He talks to us some of the dangers involved in the job and offers additional tips for those considering the trade. Stay tuned, and remember, make today a good news day.